All right, so last video I was talking about insect segmentation in the basic form of their body, but I forgot that I should probably do a primer on insect directionality in biology. So when I realized that I was using terminology that non-biologists maybe not familiar with very well. So I figured I'd go back and do a quick primer using this bee and some beetles some beetle pictures, just so that everyone knows all of the information about when I say like things are on the venter, things are on the dorsum, cephalic and caudal, things like that. So if you look at this bee here, we have a couple different directions. So we have this up-down direction, this left-right direction. And as far as left-right, it is custom that insects, when they're pinned or when they're photographed, they should be with their head facing to the left. It's not technically important, but it is custom, and the reason for that is when we give directional information, if everyone has prepared their insects facing the same direction, people won't get confused. So with insects, it's always pointing to the left. Oddly enough, with some other invertebrates like snails and slugs, it's always pointed to the right. But for entomologists, it's pretty much always to the left. So we have this left-right direction, we have the up-down direction, we have the head point, the tail point, a middle point, so let's call that this, and then we have a point away from the body onto like the limbs. Let me make sure with my notes that that's everything I want to cover. Yeah. So with all this directionality, you assume that there's an invisible line running down the center of the body here. So you assume that there's this invisible line that runs down the center of the body this direction as your starting point. So you have the cephalic end here. This is just another name for head. And you have the caudal end, which is another name for tail. And in this middle part, this middle plane of the body, the side of the body, is called the lateral plane. Top, when we're talking about the top of the insect, this is the dorsum, or the dorsal plane. And its opposite, the stomach of the insect, is called the venter, or the ventral plane. And then from left and right, towards the head, towards the cephalic end, this is the anterior portion, and the posterior portion. And then finally, you have towards the center of the body and away from the center of the body. So away from, this is distal. Sometimes this is also called apical. And then towards this middle line, this is called medial. So that's the basic direction if we're looking at something like this wasp, if we're looking at it from the side. Let me get a different photo here. But what about a different view? Just so you can get used to seeing it. Here is a scarab. And so instead of looking at it laterally, facing to the left, looking at the side of the body, this is facing to the left, but looking at from the top down. So the pattern stays the same. You have a left to right plane. Let's call this up down. I'm going to draw it diagonally since we're kind of looking at it from top down. And then you have this limb here, close to the center of the body, far from the center of the body. So again, this is the pen. This is the anterior portion. This is the posterior. If you're going from close to the center of the body to the far tip of the leg, this would be the medial end. And this would be the distal end, or the apical. And then the top of the body is the dorsum. And the bottom, the stomach of the body is the venter. One of the weird things that happens, let me get a different color here, particularly with beetles, is what we refer to as the apex and the base of things. So, for instance, you can, when I was talking about apical on the leg here, the apex would be this. This is the apex. And this would be the base of the leg. Things get a little weird when we're talking about the full body. So you would think, well, this is the base of the head. But it's also this, so this is the head. This portion here, this shield that you see on the back of them, this is called the pronotum. And I'll explain what that means in a different one. But on insects, this big shield you see right behind the head is called the pronotum. The base of the head is also the apex of the pronotum. And this is the base of the pronotum. And then it gets a little weirder with insects. This is the base of what we call the elytra. So the elytra is this thing here. Elytra. This is the forewing. This is what most people would call the shell of a beetle. This is actually the forewing of the beetle. And the hind wing is what beetles used to fly. But this would be the base of the elytra. And then all the way over here, this is the apex, or the distal end of the elytra. I say this, pointed out now, if you're not really interested in beetles, this is not something that comes up a lot. But if you are interested in beetles, this does come up quite a bit. Well, they'll say like, well, the base of the pronotum. And you're like, oh, that's here. And then they'll say the base of the elytra. And your instinct is to go, well, that must be the far end. And it's not. That's the apex. The base is lit. So there's this middle line, right here that we base everything off of. So that can be sometimes a little confusing. But that is the basic version of directionality. And then once you kind of understand that, now when I use the terms like, well, the posterior area of this insect or something, you'll have a little better of an idea of what I'm talking about.